Have you ever felt like you don't belong? Like the world around you operates on rules that make no sense? Nietzsche believed that highly intelligent people don't just struggle with social norms, they reject them entirely. He believed that the smartest individuals reject social norms not because they're rebellious, but because they see through the illusion. They refuse to follow a path designed for the masses and instead create their own. From the moment we are born, we are surrounded by rules, unwritten laws that dictate how we should behave, what we should believe, and even what we should aspire to be. These rules are what we call social norm. To understand why intelligence leads to the rejection of social norms completely, we need to go back to one of Nietzsche's most important concepts, the herd mentality. According to Nietzsche, society is structured to maintain order. The majority of people, the herd, follow social norms because it makes life simpler. Conformity creates stability. It removes uncertainty. But the cost of this stability is critical thinking. Highly intelligent people, on the other hand, are wired differently. Their minds don't accept things at face value. They analyze, dissect, and deconstruct the rules that others follow without hesitation. And what do they find? That many of these rules are arbitrary, irrational, and even oppressive. One of the biggest reasons intelligent people reject social norms is because they see through the illusion. Most people believe in certain ideas simply because they were told to believe them, whether it's religion, politics, morality, or success. Think about it. Why do we celebrate specific traditions? Why do we chase certain careers? Why do we consider some behaviors normal and others strange? Many of these beliefs are not based on logic, but on centuries-old traditions that no one ever stopped to question. Nietzsche argued that morality itself is often a tool for control. He saw traditional moral values, especially those shaped by religion, as a way to keep people obedient, not necessarily good. He believed that individuals should create their own value rather than blindly adopting those of society. But how many people do that? For most people, comfort is more important than truth. Believing what society tells you is easier than questioning everything. But intelligent individuals are different. They are not satisfied with easy answers. They want real answers, even if they're uncomfortable. This is why they struggle to accept social norms, because many norms are based on convenience, not truth. Take the idea of success. Society tells us that success means getting a high-paying job, buying a house, and starting a family. But an intelligent person might ask, does that truly bring fulfillment? Or is it just what we've been conditioned to believe? Are we living for ourselves or for an idea that was forced upon us? Another major reason intelligent people reject norms is their natural resistance to authority. They don't just obey because someone tells them to. They need to understand why. Nietzsche himself despised blind obedience. He believed that authority figures, whether political leaders, religious institutions, or even cultural icons, often manipulate the masses. He warned that people should never accept authority without deep self-examination. This explains why intelligent individuals often clash with authority figures. They challenge teachers in school, question bosses at work, and refuse to follow rules that seem arbitrary or outdated. They are not trying to be rebellious for the sake of it. They simply refuse to accept control without justification. One of the downsides of intelligence is overanalyzing everything. While the average person follows social customs instinctively, an intelligent person dissects. For example, imagine walking into a party. Most people engage in small talk, follow social etiquette, and fit in effortlessly. But an intelligent person, they might start wondering, why do people say things they don't mean? Why do we pretend to be interested in conversations that bore us? Why do we value politeness over honesty? What seems natural to others feels like a scripted performance to them. Nietzsche's entire philosophy revolves around becoming who you truly are, what he called the path to the Übermensch. And that path requires one thing above all: rejecting anything that limits your personal growth. Highly intelligent individuals naturally prioritize individuality over conformity. They would rather be misunderstood than compromise their identity. But this comes with a cost: alienation. Nietzsche himself spent much of his life alone, misunderstood, and ridiculed. Yet today, his ideas influence millions. The same pattern repeats throughout history. Thinkers, inventors, and revolutionaries often stand alone because they refuse to fit into a mold that was never meant for them. At first glance, social norms seem harmless. They provide structure, a sense of order, a way for people to coexist. But Nietzsche saw them differently. He believed that these norms were not just guidelines for social harmony, they were tools of control. To him, most people, the majority, follow norms not because they are inherently good or logical, but because it is easier than thinking for themselves. He called this the herd mentality, and according to Nietzsche, those who refuse to conform are the ones who seek something greater. But here's where it gets interesting. Social norms are not universal truths. They are not laws of nature. They are entirely constructed by society. And what's even more revealing, they change over time. What was once seen as normal can become outdated. In medieval time, people believed in the divine right of kings, where rulers were chosen by God, and questioning authority was considered a sin. Today, most of the world has moved past this idea. But back then, rejecting this norm would make you a radical, a heretic, an outcast. So, if social norms change, if they are not absolute, then why do normal people still follow them so blindly? One reason is that social norms offer security. They give people a sense of belonging. Humans are social creatures, and being part of a group, whether it's a family, a nation, or a religion, provides comfort. It removes uncertainty. It tells you exactly what to do, so you don't have to think too much about it. But Nietzsche argued that this need for security is precisely what keeps people trapped. The herd follows norms because it is safe. Thinking for yourself is dangerous. It forces you to confront uncomfortable truths, to step outside of what is familiar. And for many, that is terrifying. Most normal people would rather be wrong with the majority than right alone. And this is where highly intelligent individuals begin to struggle, because they are wired to question, to analyze, to see beyond what is simply accepted. And the moment they start questioning these social structures, they begin to realize that many of them are built on nothing but illusion. Throughout history, some of the greatest thinkers, artists, and philosophers have rejected the norms of their time. Socrates, for example, refused to conform to Athenian traditions. He asked questions no one wanted to hear. For that, he was sentenced to death. The truth is, social norms are not always designed to serve you. They are designed to maintain order, to keep the majority in line. But for those who see through them, there comes a choice: conform or carve your own path. So, what does this mean for you? It means that every time you feel like you don't fit in, every time you question something that others blindly follow, you are doing something that most people are afraid to do. You are thinking for yourself. Rejecting social norms is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it allows for true intellectual freedom, creativity, and self-discovery. On the other hand, it can lead to loneliness, frustration, and even self-doubt. Nietzsche believed that this struggle was necessary, that those who think differently will always face resistance, but that resistance is proof that you are on the right path. Rejecting social norms is often seen as a sign of independence, intelligence, even strength. But what happens when standing apart turns into isolation, when the pursuit of truth leaves you disconnected from the world around you? This is the dark side of rejecting social norms. Nietzsche admired those who refused to conform, but he also understood the dangers that came with it: loneliness, alienation, inner turmoil. These are the hidden costs of thinking differently. And while intelligence can help you see through society's illusions, it doesn't always prepare you for the consequences of standing alone. One of the first things that happens when you reject social norms is that you start to feel disconnected from others. The conversations that once seemed normal now feel shallow. The traditions people follow without question seem absurd. And the more you see through the illusions, the harder it becomes to relate to those who still believe in them. This can lead to a deep sense of loneliness. You may find it difficult to form meaningful connections because your thoughts operate on a different level. And as Nietzsche pointed out, most people fear those who think too deeply. They see them as outsiders, as threats to the established order. So, what happens? They distance themselves. They reject the thinker, not because he is wrong, but because he makes them uncomfortable. Nietzsche himself experienced this. His ideas were too radical for his time. He lost friendships, became estranged from his family, and spent much of his later years in solitude. The cost of seeing the world differently is often walking through it alone. Rejecting social norms doesn't just create external problems, it creates internal struggles as well. When you separate yourself from the herd, you lose the safety and structure that social norms provide. Suddenly, you are responsible for creating your own beliefs, your own value, your own purpose. This is both liberating and terrifying. Nietzsche believed that most people follow norms because it makes life easier. The moment you reject them, you face the full weight of existence. You no longer have a pre-written script to follow, and that level of freedom can be overwhelming. It can lead to existential dread, self-doubt, even despair. This is why many highly intelligent people struggle with depression and anxiety. Their minds never stop analyzing, questioning, searching. And when they don't find clear answers, it can lead to a feeling of being lost. Society doesn't reward those who question, it punishes. Throughout history, People who have challenged norms have been silenced, exiled, or ridiculed. Galileo was condemned for questioning the church. Socrates was sentenced to death for encouraging people to think for themselves. Nietzsche was dismissed as a madman in his own time. Even today, rejecting social norms comes at a cost. It can mean losing job opportunities, being seen as difficult or arrogant, and facing constant misunderstanding. For example, have you ever expressed an unpopular opinion only to be met with hostility? That's because society doesn't like those who disrupt the status quo. It prefers obedience over originality, agreement over truth. So, when you refuse to follow the norm, you don't just stand out, you make yourself a target. One of the hardest parts of rejecting social norm is the search for meaning. Most people find purpose in what society tells them to: career, family, religion, success. But when you see through these constructs, what's left? Nietzsche warned of the dangers of nihilism, the belief that life has no inherent meaning. When old values are stripped away, it's easy to fall into despair. This is why many intelligent individuals struggle with a sense of purposelessness. But Nietzsche also believed in a solution: the creation of one's own value. He argued that instead of falling into nihilism, we must become the architects of our own meaning. This is the path of the Übermensch, the higher individual who doesn't just reject norm, but replaces them with something greater. Think of great artists, philosophers, and innovators. They didn't just reject the world, they built new one. They found meaning in creation, in self-expression, in pushing humanity forward. And that is the true challenge of rejecting norm, not just tearing them down, but finding something worth living for beyond them. Growth is impossible without resistance. A seed must break through the soil to reach the sun. A butterfly must struggle out of its cocoon to spread its wing. And in the same way, personal growth requires breaking free from the constraints of social norm. Nietzsche believed that to become who we truly are, we must reject the values imposed on us and create our own. He called this process self-overcoming, the constant struggle to rise above limitation, comfort, and conformity. Most people live according to the scripts written. They follow norms not because they believe in them, but because it's easier. But growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens when you question, challenge, and reshape your reality. By rejecting norm, you create space for new ideas, new perspectives, and new possibilities. You stop living by default and start living with intention. So, the question is, will you follow the path set before, or will you break free and become something greater? If you enjoyed video, please consider to subscribe. We just started.